Coming up on the Tall Mike Wine Podcast.
Alcohol helps that happen, but in the proper dose. Too small of a dose, it might not happen. Too large of a dose.
Oh, it's never going to happen.
Right? It's great advice for life, though.
Eat cake naked. Yes.
Maybe not at the kid's birthday party, though. Let's talk about sex.
Because they asked me a question to which the answer was something to do with erectile dysfunction.
Okay.
And I said the words erectile dysfunction.
And now, the Tall Mike Wine Podcast.
The cell phones have been silenced. The wine is poured. And just like that, the podcast begins. Welcome to episode 24 of the Tall Mike Wine Podcast. My name's Mike Stone, your tall wine geek host for the wine podcast that's not all about wine. The wine podcast like no other. Heard in 37 countries on 6 continents. Yes, there's been a major breakthrough into Africa. Hello, Nairobi, Kenya, and Rabat, Morocco. Oh, and on the home front, 44 of these United States and the District of Columbia. It would seem we have the attention of the people in Chicago. It's kind of caught fire with downloads in the last month or so. Also, Hockessin, Delaware, where Rob is telling his friends about us. And thank you, Carl, with a K, in Burlingame, California. Also, everyone in towns from Northville, Michigan to Las Vegas, Nevada, from Dallas, Texas to Los Altos, California. And it's great to see Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and Youngstown, Ohio in the mix. I'm glad you've made time for the podcast, and thanks for giving us ratings on Apple Podcasts. And now you can do that on Spotify, the recently controversial Spotify. Ratings and reviews help out a lot, or so I am told. This episode is my first of 2022 and my first of the second year of the Tall Mike Wine Podcast. It has just turned a year old, and we had a really fun Zoom call a few weeks back celebrating. Yes, those Zoom calls can be fun if you do it right with wine. Now, to my guest for episode 24. She is an aphrodisiac foods expert who holds the title Master of Gastronomy from Le Cordon Bleu and has written a book called Fork Me, Spoon Me. She maintains a website called EatSomethingSexy.com. That might be the sexiest.com name ever. However, her wine bona fides are legit. She currently lives in Los Angeles, but at one time she was here in Sonoma working in the wine biz. And of course, we all know wine is the best aphrodisiac there is, right? Hello and welcome to the podcast, Amy Riley. Hi.
Hi. Hello, and thank you for having me.
You're quite welcome. I have been poking around on your website, and I'll let you know I'm about to up my intake of salmon, which is already, I'm a native of the Pacific Northwest, so it's already my favorite fish, and I eat a lot of it. But because it's on your list of best food for men in a sexual way, that's pretty awesome.
It is. I actually just updated my favorite salmon recipe, so it's right there on the homepage.
Cool.
It's a good one.
So just scrolling through your Twitter feed is a great way to see what you've been writing. Let's touch on a few highlights that caught my eye. Planning a memorable Valentine's Day? Here are some things you might want to learn about lobster. What do we need to know about lobster, Amy?
Well, I mean, lobster was once the food of convicts, if you didn't know that.
Yes, it was a lot like a lot of the things that we eat now as delicacies.
Yes.
A lot of it was peasant food because, they were these little bugs that were at the bottom of the ocean.
Exactly. But, I mean, who was responsible for populating North America? It was those peasants. You know why? They ate the lobster.
Oh, they ate the lobster, and that made them have a lot of babies.
Yeah. So lobster is an aphrodisiac for a variety of reasons. Some of it is nutrients that you get from lobster. And frankly, all seafood is, you already mentioned salmon, all seafood is considered historically aphrodisiac, largely because Aphrodite was believed to have been carried from the sea to the shore. That's how she was born, on a scallop shell, very romantic way to arrive. And so seafood is viewed as the food of Aphrodite. But, as I said, there's a lot of nutrition that actually goes into it that makes it all make sense.
Minerals or things like that.
Correct.
prevalent
Right.
in
Yes.
things like lobster.
Exactly. Things like zinc, protein, lower fat, low in saturated fat forms of protein. So you get lots of energy.
Until you dip it all in butter.
Well, there's that.
You mentioned Aphrodite, which, of course, I hadn't even thought about it. We think about the word aphrodisiac, and it's like, oh, that's something that makes everybody feel sexy. But that is the root, isn't it? Aphrodite.
Yes, Greek goddess, yes.
That's awesome. More reasons to love caviar. Did you know it's a health food?
It is indeed. Well, caviar can increase nitric oxide production in your body, which is the same thing like erectile dysfunction medications.
Okay.
Will sort of function in a similar way. So, maybe if you eat a lot of caviar, you would never ever need any help in that area.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. I mean, they're eggs, right, from fish. So again, we're talking about lots of nutrients from fish. Yes,
right? Exactly.
This is concentrated because it's the eggs. Is that how it works?
I don't know if it's necessarily a concentration of the same nutrients. It seems to, when I read about the nutritional profile of caviar, it is slightly different than the things you might emphasize in salmon. Then again, I was looking at caviar from a different fish. I never looked at salmon roe. So now you've just given me homework.
Okay, you've got homework now. Happy to help. Here's why every woman should spice up her life with chili peppers. Yes.
You like all the ingredient tips, I'm noticing.
I do. I want to know what the foods are, because I cook a lot. I cook 80% of the meals in my house, and I love to just branch out into anything and everything that's interesting. And so if I get a list like your list, I'm like, oh, I'm going to start cooking with that stuff and find creative ways to incorporate it into the meals. So what is it about chili peppers and women specifically?
Women and chili peppers. So chili peppers, they're actually, of the foods, people ask me, what aphrodisiac should you serve like at a romantic dinner? This would be one of those choices because it will have an immediate effect. Whereas, you eat the caviar to increase nitric oxide production, and then you're going to have better blood flow, et cetera, et cetera. That takes a little while, right? But chili peppers, immediately, you feel them. Right. You feel them. Your tongue tingles, doesn't it?
Yes.
Your lips plump up and look more kissable.
Oh.
Your body temperature rises, so you're ready to tear off your clothing.
I love that.
Date night food.
Date night food, chili peppers.
Yes.
One bite. The next thing you know, you're naked. Did you know all women can benefit from strawberries? Is that true?
Yes. Strawberries, again, it's about the nutrients, particularly that will support women's sexual health. And so you eat a strawberry. Strawberries are actually loaded with antioxidants. We're usually talking about blueberries. We hear strawberries also loaded with antioxidants. So it's kind of an anti-aging food, a beauty food, so to speak, but also nutrients that'll support sexual health directly. So yay for strawberries.
They're also juicy.
And juicy. So juicy.
And they're red.
And they're red.
And they can make your lips nice and red and kissable.
So kissable.
Right? Okay. Last one. And then we're going to move on to maybe wine. Did you know that coconut is one of the best foods that men can eat? I did not know that. Educate me.
I know, coconut has a little bit of a bad reputation because it does have saturated fat. And so you think, I've got to stay away from this. No. Coconut is wonderful. Men, coconut water too.
Right.
Drink coconut water, have more sex. Really.
Okay. I mean, coconut water obviously is very good for hydration.
Right. Well, there's that.
And hydration is the key to everything, basically, right?
Yes. I once made a cocktail. One of the cocktail recipes in my cookbook starts at the base of coconut water because my theory was, well, then you won't get so dehydrated. You'll still feel good.
Right.
You still have to, let's face it, you still have to drink in moderation. But
yes, you do. I like to talk about this at the winery. When I talk about fermentation, I say, do you all know what I mean when I say fermentation? And I explain how it's, the very basic chemical reaction of the yeast eating the sugar, turning it into alcohol. And every alcohol in the world is created in that way. So we have the yeast to thank for all of this alcohol. In fact, if we didn't have yeast, eating sugar, turning it into alcohol, some of us wouldn't be here. And at that point, I usually get a few laughs, and sometimes I don't get any reaction at all. Then I have to explain.
Oh,
And this is what I like to say.
awkward.
And this is like there'll be a group of 10 people I'm giving a tour, and I'll say, "You guys all know where babies come from, right?" Alcohol helps that happen, but in the proper dose.
Yeah.
Too small of a dose, it might not happen. Too large of a dose.
Oh, it's never going to happen.
Right?
Correct.
All right. Speaking of alcohol, we're on the Wine Podcast. It's not all about wine, but we do sip wine while we chat. You've got a glass of wine in front of you. What's in your glass?
I have a rosé. So let me show you. So this is a fun thing. It was sent to me as a Valentine thing. It's called the Grand. Wait, I got to get them all in. The Grand Love Triangle. And the idea is you get these cute little bottles.
Let me take a picture of that. It'll end up on my Instagram here. I'm terrible at this. I'm doing these interviews and I plug, my Instagram, and I'm always like, follow me on Instagram. And then I'm like, oh, I forgot to take pictures. So there I have a picture of you in your little bottle.
Oh, how lovely. So the idea is you get 6. And so it's a wine tasting for 2.
Okay.
And it's a love triangle because it's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yes.
There it is. Thank you for
I'm
demonstrating.
Good at shape. Yeah.
Very good. Now let's do rectangle.
So So I am, I'm kind of checking them out. Their concept was we're going to make sampling of an affordable sampling, small format bottles that don't suck. It's basically their pitch. Obviously it's beautiful packaging. I don't know from a sustainability standpoint. I mean, they are little plastic bottles. They were kind of fighting against the aluminum, the aluminum can.
Oh, the canned wine. Canned wine is a big thing now.
Well, right. This was sort of, a more sophisticated way of doing things. And so they made a Valentine's night at home plan with these.
That's nice.
So I haven't actually tasted them. I can't even speak to how they are, but I do have the rosé in my glass.
Take a big sip. Take a big sip and tell me about it. Tell me what you can tell me about it.
All right. It is rosé.
Hey, rosé all day.
Actually, it's a very well-balanced wine. It's very pleasant. And
okay.
I picked the rosé of the 3 because I was really drawn to this sort of apricot color.
Uh-huh.
It was just just a pleasant it was a romantic sort of rosé. And since we were going to talk about aphrodisiacs, I decided that would be what's in my glass, but it's very citrusy and orange blossomy.
Some of the rosés from the south of France are some of the better ones and more economical ones that you can buy.
Right. Yes.
Because, a lot of the New World rosés, I feel like the wineries are taking advantage of that. It's trendy.
Right.
And they charge more money for the rosé. And you can buy a really decent bottle of Languedoc rosé for $12. And it's phenomenal.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
Your book is a cookbook, Fork Me, Spoon Me. I like that it's a playful title and you can turn it around. Fork me, fork you, man.
That's actually where the title came from.
What?
So I was on a very, shall we say, unproductive phone call with the publisher who was going to potentially publish this book. And it was a lot of, you can't do that and you shouldn't do that. And I put down the phone and I went, fork you.
It sounds like the fun police were on your case.
Yeah. And after I went, fork you, I was like, wait, I got a title. So yes, that is why it's called Fork Me, Spoon Me.
And what's in the book? If somebody should, I see that it's available at Target. That's great.
It's so random. I discovered it's sold through Target and Walmart.
You should be selling billions and billions of them, especially right now. Valentine's is upon us.
It's my time of year. So it's actually, I have published, is it 5 aphrodisiac cookbooks.
You've been doing this for a while then.
I have been doing this for a while, yes. A Fork Me, Spoon Me is still my personal favorite. So I probably talk about it more than the others. But my most recent, I think, is my most interesting book. It is called Eat Cake Naked. It is all desserts, all aphrodisiac desserts. And it was co-authored by a nutritional expert named Alana Flagg. And she has written a lot at Eat Something Sexy. And I just kind of said, you've got great advice here. Let's do a dessert book, because she is also actually a chef. The kind of weird thing is we decided to do it as an ebook. And I still haven't quite figured out how do you promote an ebook? And so it kind of flies under the radar compared to my print books, but it's really cool.
It's great advice for life, though. Eat cake
naked. Yes.
Maybe not at the kid's birthday party, though.
Well, that would be a memorable party.
That would be very memorable. How did this whole thing start for you? What got you started down the aphrodisiacal path?
I was writing about wine.
Okay.
I was working freelance, and I just felt I needed to diversify. And I really like Greek mythology, plain and simple. But I also was always interested in the nutrition side of food. It just was something, well, I'm really interested in these two things, and here's a topic that combines the two. When I started researching it, there was very, very little information. I take that back. There was plenty of information, like from an anthropological standpoint, but that was about it. And so it was challenging. It was a fun challenge for me. It wasn't embraced at first, shall we say.
It wasn't embraced as like real like journalism or science. It was more like, oh, this is going to be sold at the novelty stores.
It was more of a, that's just too risque. You shouldn't talk about that. Yeah.
That's ridiculous,
right? I know. Well, how far we've come. So that was around, 2004, 2005.
Madison Avenue has known that sex sells for decades and decades and decades.
Right.
But I guess it has to be subtle. It has to be implied. It can't just be right out there like, let's talk about sex.
Yeah.
Because that's gonna turn people off.
What's weird is that every time I would go to do like a radio show or a television show, when I was first promoting my books, each one would have different rules. Mm-hmm. The CBS morning show couldn't say, eat something sexy. That was a no-no. But they could show my books. And then I go to the Today Show, and they're like, you can't show your books, but we could talk about eat something sexy.
And did they give you a list of words you couldn't say? Like you can't say penis.
Unfortunately, I got in trouble. I was not given the list in advance, and I should have been. I got in trouble by Martha Stewart Weddings Radio and was told I was never welcome back because they asked me a question to which the answer was something to do with erectile dysfunction. Okay. And I said the words erectile dysfunction. I'm not kidding. You are banned for life.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. You don't want to bum everybody out in Martha Stewart's world by talking about ED.
I'm sorry, but they asked a question to which ED was a natural answer. I don't know.
Tell me about becoming a master of gastronomy. Le Cordon Bleu.
That is a Master of Arts program. It was a collaboration between the University of Adelaide in Adelaide, Australia, and Le Cordon Bleu. It was an actual Master of Arts degree, and we basically studied everything except how to cook food.
Everything about food.
Except how to cook it.
We'll let somebody else.
There was a lot of talk about cooking. There were a lot of chefs who were in the program. There was plenty of chatter about cooking, but we were studying, food and culture and health and history. And
that's so interesting. So you weren't studying to be a chef?
No.
Were you one of those kids that was really into food, or were you more of a typical picky eater as a child?
So I was reasonably picky as a child. However, I was also really into food. So I wouldn't eat tomatoes, but I would go to a restaurant and eat snails.
So you were adventurous, but you had things that were like...
things that were... I still won't eat beets. Beets taste like a bowl of dirt to me. That's one that I never outgrew. I also really do not... I'm so sorry, I don't care for peas.
That's okay. The peas will be fine.
I know you're supposed to give peas a chance and all that, but...
So where was it that you grew up, and who was around, and who was cooking the food, and what was typical of a meal when you were a young person?
Oh, I grew up in the classic American household, the two children, boy and girl, the two parents, male and female. My mother stayed home and cooked. She did work for our family business, but she worked from home. And she did all the cooking until I actually got quite interested. And I took over sometimes when I was, maybe starting around 10 or 11.
You're like, how does it work? I want to cook it. Oh, yeah. I can do that.
I did.
That's cool when kids decide, hey, this is fascinating stuff, and I want to turn on the burners. Because I think every kid wants to play in the kitchen. I mean, that's why they sell those kitchen sets for little kids, right? Because kids want to turn the knobs, but it's fun when they follow through and are like, oh, and they're open to learning how and why. And then you have to warn them multiple times not to burn the house down.
Well, luckily, we only had an electric stove, so there wasn't as much chance of burning the house down.
Are you ready to hear what's in my glass?
I'm so ready.
All right. It's a red wine. As you can see, It's a red wine. It is a Cabernet Franc from the state of Washington.
Nice.
And it's from the Canvasback winery, which is actually a subsidiary of Duckhorn. Very well known. Napa. A lot of there's a lot of buzz about Washington wine. I'm a native of Washington State, and that's where I initially cut my teeth on wine, in the Columbia Valley.
Nice.
And so I'm a big fan of the wines from Washington State. And as the California wineries are realizing there's something going on in Washington, some of them are going up there to get a piece of it. So Duckhorn went up there a few years ago and started planting grapes and developed their label Canvasback. And this is a Cabernet Franc that is pulling fruit from one of the more esteemed vineyards in Washington State that was planted back in the 70s, the Ciel de Cheval Vineyard. People that listen to the podcast might recall that I did an episode around my vacation up into Washington late last year, where I interviewed the man whose family planted the vineyard back in the 1970s. So this is a Cabernet Franc. It is mostly Cab Franc. There's a little bit of Merlot in it, a little bit of Cabernet, only 3%, but still it's there. It ages for 20 months in French oak. 60% of the barrels were brand new. So it has that really nice, smooth texture to it that you get from 20 months in barrel. And of course, since a lot of those barrels were new, you get a lot of this nice kind of cocoa aroma, a little bit of chocolatey. And then you've got this really rich, dark fruit, which is just delicious. And the wine is pretty phenomenal, I would say, since you're here. Very sexy.
Nice. Now, did you stumble upon my article on the pheromonal sense of wine?
I don't really know where I stumbled upon you in general, and I don't think I've seen... I don't know how I came to know about you, but when I did, I was like, I got to get her on the podcast. So the pheromonal, go ahead. Pheromonal.
So there was an Australian vintner, Dr. Max Lake, also a physician. He was very interested in basically the relationship between wine and sex. He studied the aromas of wine and was able to discern certain aromas in wine that basically replicate human pheromones.
The thing that
his
attracts
theory,
people to each other.
Right. And his theory was that if you choose the right wine, you could turn someone on. The interesting thing was he found that women were most turned on by the wines that sort of had the female pheromone qualities, and men were turned on by quite possibly some of the aromas in the glass you've got right there.
The big, bold reds.
The big reds, yeah.
I was going to ask you about that because that's what I am typically, if I have my choice of what I'm drinking, it's going to be pretty big. You know, the Cabernets, I love the Shiraz they make in the Barossa Valley of Australia. Big, just huge wines, and then lots and lots of time in an oak barrel, the smoothness, that kind of thing.
So, you know, sort of leathery, mushroomy, these are kind of qualities you're going to look for. Truffly. Men like those, yeah.
Men like those. Yeah. And that turns them on? And then women? Women,
so it's the sweaty whites.
The sweaty whites.
Yeah, a little petrol, a little sweat, a little,
like you might find in an Alsatian Riesling that's super dry.
Right, or maybe a Merceau.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweaty.
Yeah.
Let's start using
that sort of breachy sort of aroma, or that sort of slightly feral, sweaty kind of characteristics. Have you ever, I'm sure you have, you've had a Chardonnay from the San Giacomo vineyard?
I actually have one in my refrigerator right now that was given to me by a friend of mine who works for the family at their winery.
I find every wine that I have tried from that vineyard has those qualities, those pheromone qualities. Every single one.
Every wine, red and white from
Every
San
white.
Giacomo?
Every
white wine.
Every white wine from San Giacomo has at least a little bit of that.
That's
sweaty,
interesting.
sexy.
I'll have to ask my friend Megan about that because she works for the winery. They've been growing grapes. The San Giacomos have been growing grapes for about 100 years.
Yeah.
And it's only in the last 20 or so they started making wine under their own label. They were selling grapes to wineries all over Sonoma, and you'll see that name on wine bottles everywhere you go. Yeah. Whatever winery it is, the San Giacomo Chardonnay. Yeah. And now they should be putting extra sweaty on the label.
Sexy San Giacomo.
What about those Sauvignon Blancs that kind of smell like a litter box?
I was about to say the cat pee wines. No.
Yes.
No, those don't make it. No.
For humans. I bet it turns the cats on.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And then meow.
Yeah.
Puts them right into heat.
It's really the things that are more earthy that you find in a white.
Okay. Like when you smell that kind of clay smell.
That kind of clay smell, that kind of we said the petrol, that cheesy funk.
Right. No, a lot of times you stick your face in the glass and it's like, wow, this smells like blue cheese. You get that a little bit sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you were to say like the best wine for men, like if I would make you go out on a limb and like name a varietal, what would it be?
There are some really sexy red Burgundies, but there are also some like super sexy Napa Cab blends.
Okay.
It's just going to be big. Whatever it is, it's going to be big. I've definitely seen those qualities in some big Shiraz, but not as frequently.
What about for women?
For women.
Specific. I mean, you kind of did it already.
So we talked about the Alsatian Riesling, Blanc de Blanc Champagne.
Oh, sparkling wine.
You got to get that in there.
Yeah, bubbles. Bubbles. You can never go wrong with bubbles when it's like a date situation, I think. Is there something about the bubbles? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, there's something about the bubbles. And it's really that they just, I don't want to say they make you drunk faster, but they make you drunk faster. They
Sometimes it's just basic. There's alcohol in it, and that gets you drunk.
Yeah, the bubbles lower your inhibitions a little more quickly because it goes through your bloodstream a little faster. So you kind of get this zing of, and you may not necessarily, like if you tested your blood alcohol, you may not necessarily be drunk, but you feel it a little faster. You feel that kind of giddy, happy, inhibition lowering, vroom.
It's all in the bubbles.
Yeah.
So you have the website, the cookbooks. You said there's 5 cookbooks.
There are. Well, at least one is out of print at this point.
Oh,
I've been doing this a long time.
Okay.
Things happen. And
where were you when you were here? Cycle. Where were you when you were here in California? I read that you worked at a winery and a tasting room.
I did. So, I am still in California. I know the North and South are like 2 different states, but...
No, you're not in California. You're in LA. That's different. It should be its own state.
So I lived in Santa Rosa, and I worked in the tasting room at Ferrari Carano in Healdsburg.
Oh, okay. That's a very well-known winery.
Yes, it is.
How long were you there?
Not terribly long, maybe 10 months.
How did you like tasting room work? I manage a tasting room myself, so I like to know what people's experiences are when they work in a tasting room.
I really enjoyed it. But keep in mind, it was my first job after college, and I had a plan. I knew that I was moving on. It was a great opportunity to learn about wine, and it was just a great place to be. It's a beautiful tasting room. Mm-hmm. So, and I got to be around, I was living alone and I didn't know a lot of people. So I was around people all day. It was the perfect job for that time in my life.
One thing I like is I feel like every day I come to work and I feel like I travel because I meet people from every corner of the country. Right now, we're not meeting people from every corner of the globe because those people aren't coming here right now. Even just in the last week, I talked to people from Ohio and Florida, and there were some people actually visiting from Florida that were from Colombia. And, it's so much fun because they come to learn about wine, and then I kind of sneakily ask them lots of questions about themselves, and I get to learn about different cultures and the way people are. And I'm fascinated by that. People really fascinate me. So that's why I love being in the tasting room, aside from the fact that, there's wine all around me and I get to talk about wine all day.
Everything smells like wine when you work in a tasting room. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, and you're around it. And then harvest time comes, and that's really a cool time.
I was there during harvest time. It was exciting.
Tell me what's next for you. Where are you taking all of this? You've got the website, the books. What's next?
That's funny. I haven't even considered that. I've been concentrating on the website and trying to grow it into something greater than what it is. And I'm really enjoying that. But right now, I have 2 young children. I mean, when I think about what's next, it's like, where am I taking the children for summer? That's what's next for me.
That's a short-term plan. What am I feeding the kids for dinner?
Yes, exactly. That's what's next. So as far as what's next, work-wise, I'm sure there's another book in me someday. But for now, I just want to continue to grow the website and enjoy doing what I'm doing. I enjoy doing things like this.
Well, you're doing it great. I've been perusing the website. I like what I read. It's very well laid out. It's a nice looking site. It's called eatsomething.sexy.com. The book that we're talking about is Fork Me, Spoon Me. Thanks for hanging out, Amy. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much for having me. This was fun.
The Tall Mike Wine Podcast was conceived and is written, produced, edited, and maintained by yours truly. To see how it all happens, follow me on Instagram at Tall Mike Wine. For questions, comments, guest suggestions, or to request your own set of Tall Mike Wine Podcast coasters, drop me an email. That's tallmikewine@gmail.com. I'd be forever grateful if you told your friends you enjoyed the podcast, and to help it continue to grow, leave us a rating and a review. Really, tell everyone. Thanks for joining me from Novato, California. I'm Mike Stone. Cheers.